Welcome back to the channel. Here's another example of a make that didn't go quite as smoothly as it could have done. Making a little bowl like this one shouldn't really be too difficult, but a small error while I was throwing it actually caused me trouble throughout the whole of the rest of the make. Let's see what happened. So I'm starting by setting up my bat system on the wheel. This is a Hartley & Noble bat system with various sized inserts, so you can use a bat, last one I'm putting in there, which is just the right size for the pot. I'm marking out the diameter of the pot I'm going to throw, and then using my square so that I can set my pointer to be where I need the rim to be when I finish throwing. I've got the dimensions for those written down. So that's the pointer, and here we are with a lump of clay. This is 600 grams of a very soft stoneware. This has virtually no particles in it at all. No grog, nothing that's of any significant size. Makes it really easy to move around, but also it's a very soft clay which will slump and collapse more easily than other clays that people often throw with. So the techniques for this one are a bit more like throwing porcelain than they are for throwing a standard stoneware. Just centred it, coned it up and down, and getting it into the right shape. One of the things with this clay is you tend to throw with slip, which is a mixture of water and clay, rather than plain water. The wheel was very dry at this point as I'm throwing. There's not much in the splash pan, so I'm actually taking water from my throwing bucket and then creating slip. That's why my hands are so messy. I am a messy potter, that's my excuse. Just starting to open here, so using my fingers to push down into the clay and pull it open. There we go, it's opening. Adding a little bit more water so I can create some more slip. It's really important that this particular clay doesn't get sticky at all. So you pay quite a lot of attention to getting the surface slippery, using slip before you make any throwing moves. So I'm ready for the first pull here. Just setting my pointer and now starting to pull up a little bit just to get the clay moving upwards. Wheel's moving fairly slowly. Again, that's a characteristic of throwing with this particular clay. So I'm using my thumb inverted on the outside and trying to pull against my fingers that are on the inside, and I'm trying to keep the shape inside the bowl to be not too square at the base. And here's the second pull. Just bringing the clay up quite slowly. And you can see the rim is starting to wobble at this point. And that's the point at which I lose the pot. The rim's wobbling, and I didn't correct that wobble before I tried a second pull. And this second pull is just going to make things worse. I didn't complete the first pull properly, and so I'd pulled one side of the pot up more than the other, didn't let the rim come round. That was the mistake. So now the pot's got a wobble. You can see the rim is actually moving up and down. I'm going to try and correct it now, but actually from now on in, that wobble is in the pot, and it's going to cause me trouble from the whole of the rest of the make. You can see that it's off centre now. I can't really correct it. It's going to continue to wobble as I pull up. And now what I'm trying to do is move the rim out closer to where the pointer is. That's going to define the overall height and the overall width of the bowl. But with that wobble, that makes things very, very difficult at this point. You can see I'm checking where the rim is in relation to the pointer as I pull. The clay's coming out, and it's not really lifting very easily. And there you can really see now how the wobble's getting worse as I try to bring the bowl out. I'm managing to get some shape into it. You can see right down near the wheel head that it is coming out. So this is a circular rib. I designed and printed this using my 3D printer. It gives me a way of pressing the inside of the bowl into a nice curved shape. I'm just supporting the outside of the bowl with my hand as I do it. It's really important to compress the clay inside a pot while you're throwing it to avoid getting cracks in the bottom. One more go at getting the size of the pot right. So there's an awful lot of toing and froing now because that pot is off centre and the rim is wobbling. Now with this clay it's important you leave a lot of material around the base to support the shape, particularly when it's a bowl that's going to be coming out. Not a straight-sided bowl, but a curved-sided bowl. I can remove some of that now because I'm not going to touch the profile anymore before I set it aside to dry. So just pulling the clay off. It's really important as the clay comes away not to let it wrap round the pot because it'll just stick and be really hard to remove. Final operation then is just to apply wet chamois leather onto the rim very, very gently. A little bit of clean up, remove moisture from the bat before I take it off. And you see with this bat system I can just remove the small inner bat, and now it's much easier to store that pot while it dries. So this is the following day. Again, I'm replacing the bat on the wheel. The pot's had a chance to dry out somewhat, and I'm going to put it back on the wheel to trim it. It's still stuck firmly to the bat, so I can trim it in place. First of all, because I've got a wobbly rim, I'm going to try and just take the surface off where it's too tall. And this means keeping the tools as still as possible and letting the pot come up to cut just at the high points. And as I do that, I'm also slightly deforming the rim because the pot's really still quite wet. It's probably a little bit too wet to be trimming at this point. And now I can do a bit on the side of the pot and actually just thin it down and start to get some of the final shape. There's more clay in here at the moment than I actually need. It's a feature of these very soft clays. You tend to throw with a bit more material and take it off later in the process because you need more material so that it holds its shape, it doesn't collapse under its own weight or the process. I'm just trying to true up the inside. Now I finished on the outside of the pot. Oops. I need to take it off the bat so I can invert it. And the first tool I used I actually broke. That's a tool I made myself. I applied too much pressure really. And so, having partially removed the pot, I'm now just using a wire to finish off taking it off the bat. The pots stick very firmly to the bats while they're still wet and can be tricky to get off. And this is a different tool, my Giffen grip. When the pot's dried out a little bit more, I can upturn it and place it on here so that I can shape the bottom of the pot. These three arms move in equally, so when it's held in place, the pot's right in the middle of the wheel. And here we go. I've got a lot of material to take away from the base. As I said, I left a lot on there to support it while I was throwing it. And now's the time to actually put the bottom of the bowl shape into the piece. Again, the pot is slightly wet for doing this. I'm just marking now where the inside of the foot ring is going to be so that I can take out material from the middle without going too far out to the outsides. So this is all about cutting into the pot quite deeply so that I have a nice foot ring, and later in the process I'll glaze that along with the rest of the pot. So I'm just trying to recess the base, thin it down, make the pot lighter, and give myself a nice surface on which I can glaze inside that foot ring. Getting the shape of the base of the pot now. So you can see I'm curving it in more like a bowl. I know where the inside of the foot ring is now, so I've got a width of foot ring to work to. Again, there's plenty of clay there to take off. And now I want to start to define the outside of the foot ring. So what's the transition between the shape of the bowl and the shape of the foot? I've got various tools of different size cutting heads that I can use to create that shape. And this is all about just trying to make the bowl itself a smooth shape and the foot ring a defined upright piece. And this whole process would have been easier if I hadn't thrown the pot off centre to start with that one pull that didn't work properly. Pots generally dry quicker at the rim than they do at the base, and particularly with this clay, because I have so much of it at the base, it does take a long time to dry, so the pot again is quite wet. And you can see another fault here, which is every time I bring my head down, the video gets very dark, and that's because I need to think more about the positioning of the lighting I've got in my pottery. It's time just to finish up the centre of the foot. And now I'm using a plastic kidney just to try and burnish that surface, tidy it up, make it as smooth as possible, just try and increase the quality of the overall pot. And there we are, it's finished with the outside trim of the bottom, so I can now lift it off and turn it over, just do a little bit more on the rim. So the feet grip the bottom of the pot, and I keep some pressure on the inside of the pot to make sure it doesn't lift or wobble. And I can just trim up a little bit more of the inside now that it's slightly firmer than it was earlier on. And again, a little bit of burnishing, try and smooth things out. And finally, what I call potter's sandpaper, a very, very slightly damp sponge, just gives a nice final finish. Clean up some of the trimmings off the giffin grip, and that's just because sometimes they can stick to the pot while you lift it off. And that's the pot finished.